Welcome to today's webinar, Professional Learning for Successful Implementation of the California English Language Development Standards, or California ELD Standards. This is the second of 5 webinars regarding the California ELD Standards. This webinar will highlight the following chapters in the California ELD Standards publication to support professional learning for implementation. The chapters are Chapter 4, Theoretical Foundations, and the research base of the California English Language Development Standards. Chapter 5, Learning about how English works. And Chapter 6, Foundational Literacy Skills for English Learners. We welcome teachers, administrators, instructional coaches, professional learning providers, and anyone who is new to the California ELD standards or who would like to refresh their familiarity to the ELD standards. My name is Gustavo Gonzalez. I am an education programs consultant in the Language Policy and Leadership Office, or LPLO, in the Multilingual Support Division at the California Department of Education, also known as the CDE. If you can advance a slide, please, Lori. I will be presenting today's webinar along with my co-presenter, Christine.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Christine Snyder, and I'm with the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd. So the Region 15 Comprehensive Center, and you can go ahead and there you go. The Region 15 Comprehensive Center is one of 19 federally funded regional comprehensive centers. The leadership and staff at the Comprehensive Center provide capacity building technical assistance to state educational agencies. The Comprehensive Center collaborated with the CDE as thought partners on this project. It's a pleasure to be here today. And now back to Gustavo.
Excellent. Thank you, Christine. The ways to ask questions and respond to reflections. There will be opportunities to ask questions during today's session. We will answer as many questions as we can toward the end of today's webinar. Submit your questions to the question and answer feature, or the Q&A feature in the Zoom. We will post frequently asked questions, or FAQs, on the CDE English Language Development Standards webpage at a later date following today's webinar. We will post in the chat the link to the ELD Standards webpage. And another way is to email your questions to the Language Policy and Leadership Office email address at lplo@cde.ca.gov. And we will post in the chat the LPLO email. In addition, we program opportunities to reflect on today's content and post a response to the reflection prompt in Padlet. And we will post in the chat the link to Padlet. Now I will turn it back over to Christine.
Thank you, Gustavo. Okay, so we would love to know who is in attendance at today's webinar, and a poll will appear on your screen. And we'd love you to complete the poll by identifying your role or position at your local level. So if the poll does not feature your role or position, please select Other. So the poll will read, who is in attendance? Teacher, paraeducator, site administrator, or instructional coach, professional learning provider, district administrator, or school board member, County Office of Education administrator, teacher education faculty, community organization member, or other. So we'll give you about a minute to few seconds to indicate your role. And I'll count it down from 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, let's see those results. And it looks like we have 65% teachers, paraeducators, site administrator, or instructional coach. Wonderful. Then 23% County Office of Ed administrator, teacher ed faculty, community organization member, or other. And 12% professional learning provider, district admin, or school board member. Thank you so much. And so before we jump into the content, we'd like to find out more about your knowledge of the California ELD standards or California ELD, English Language Development Standards. So a second poll is going to appear on your screen. So please complete the poll, this time by identifying what experiences you have had with chapters 4, 5, and 6 of the California ELD standards. And we'll ask you to select the response that best reflects your level of familiarity. So the poll has the following options. I have extensive knowledge of these 3 chapters. So again, just chapters 4, 5, and 6 of the ELD standards. I have read these chapters before, but not recently. Or I have little or no experience with these chapters. So again, this is chapters 4, 5, and 6. I'll give you a few seconds to vote. And let's close it in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, let's close the poll and see the response. That's fantastic. 57%, I have read these chapters, but not recently. 36%, I have little or no experience with these chapters. That's great. You came to the right place. That's exactly why you're here. So great, and thank you for sharing your responses. And then we'll go to the next slide. And we'll be using 2 Padlets today. So the first is our resources Padlet, and that contains all the resources we'll be referring to today. The second is our discussion Padlet, which we will use later in the webinar during engagement activities. And both links have been placed in the chat, or you can navigate to them using the QR codes on your screen. And just to share finally our agenda, we will be framing the importance of the ELD standards. We'll be doing deep dives into chapters 4, 5, and 6. We'll be hearing a voice from the field. Stay tuned. This is a wonderful opportunity to hear from panelists who are doing this work. And finally, the closing. And just to share the goals of today's webinar, they're for participants to be able to explain the importance of chapters 4, 5, and 6 of the California ELD standards, gain deep knowledge of the content in the chapters, and identify key information that may be incorporated in professional learning, or PL, opportunities to support teachers in developing and implementing ELD instruction. And we posted in the chat a link to the CDE webpage where you can access the PDF version of the California ELD standards. Click on the Standards tab, and then you will see the link there. And in the next section, Gustavo will help us frame the importance of the ELD standards and why professional learning on the ELD standards matter.
Thank you, Christine. The ELD standards are important because they're an important part of the California English Learner, or EL Roadmap policy, particularly with Principle 2, intellectual quality of instruction and meaningful access. And of course, with its following elements: Element 2A, integrated and designated ELD; Element 2B, intellectually rich, standards-based curriculum; Element 2C, high expectations; and Element 2F, rigorous instructional material supports high levels of intellectual engagement. And we will post in the chat a link to the California EL Roadmap policy. And we are here because we know the importance of the California ELD standards for educating our EL students. The circle shown on the slide is split into 6 equal parts. Beginning at the top and moving clockwise, each section is labeled Law, Policy, English Language Arts, English Language Development Framework, or also known as the ELA ELD Framework, Observation Protocol for Teachers of English Learners, or OPTEL, English Language Proficiency Assessments for California, known as the LPAC, and Teaching and Learning. Each part represents an important element as to why the ELD standards are important. We know how important the ELD standards are in providing high quality instruction for EL students about how English works and about how English works. And we know how important the ELD standards are in providing EL students the opportunities to use English in an academic setting to make meaning of the content they're learning. The ELA ELD framework supports the implementation of the ELD standards for providing integrated and designated ELD instruction. The standards are important because the design of the Optel tool is aligned with the ELD standards and the LPAC. ELD instruction guided by the ELD standards will prepare students to achieve on the LPAC. The law states that local educational agencies, or LEAs, will ensure that EL students have access to the core academic content standards, including the ELD standards. The EL Roadmap policy highlights the ELD standards as an equitable instructional resource for educating EL students, and the ELD standards provide equitable opportunities for EL students to reach English language proficiency as fast as possible and to have access to content in the standard instructional program. The Optel is the CDE Multilingual Support Division's newest resource to support consistency and equity in the reclassification process for EL students and to support teachers in designing ELD standards aligned instruction. The Optel is a standardized, scientifically validated resource to satisfy reclassification criterion 2, teacher evaluation, and 3, parent consultation. The slide shows images of 3 pages of the Optel. Page 1 includes a description of the 4 levels for expressive skills. Page 2 includes a description of the 4 levels for receptive skills. Page 3 is the parent consultation form, and page 4, not shown on the slide, is the glossary of terms. For more information, including a detailed user guide and supports, visit the Optel webpage. Professional learning, or PL, on the California ELD standards matters because districts and schools have an obligation to ensure that EL students reach proficiency in English as fast as possible and to have access, meaningful access, to the content and content standards. In California, teachers need to be prepared to effectively teach integrated and designated ELD. Professional learning matters because it supports EL students to meet the reclassification criteria to exit the EL program within a reasonable amount of time. The LPAC is aligned to the ELD standards, and teaching EL students to develop English proficiency using the ELD standards helps them score high on the LPAC. And the Optel is aligned with the ELD standards and the LPAC performance level descriptors. An excellent professional learning resource for the English language arts standards and the English language development standards is the ELA ELD framework, chapter 11, implementing high quality English language arts and literacy and English language development instruction. Professional learning, leadership, and program supports. The screenshot on the slide shows the ELA ELD framework, chapter 11, chapter at a glance, and the sections regarding professional learning that it covers. The section implementing the ELA ELD framework within a collaborative and learning culture is on page 971. This section indicates that school communities need to successfully establish and integrate multiple program components and sustain effective instructional practices in order to ensure high quality teaching and learning experiences for all students. Implementing the ELA ELD framework within a collaborative and learning culture is the one section. Then you'll see professional learning on page 974, leadership on page 981, and program supports on page 994 of the ELA ELD framework. Professional learning, this section is on page 974, and it indicates that ongoing learning is essential to effective teaching and professional judgment in teachers. For students to achieve the ELA and the ELD standards, teachers need effective preparation and ongoing professional learning to support their own success as learners and in turn to support their students' learning. Researchers of effective professional learning for teachers of English learners suggest that professional learning should be focused on hands-on practice with teaching methods that were immediately applicable to the classroom and with in-class lesson demonstration with a teacher's own or a colleague's student. The leadership section on page 981 of the ELA-ELD framework indicates that skilled and inspirational leadership is essential to successful implementation of the ELD standards. Leadership is not confined to administrators, but involves a range of individuals who lead important professional systems and practices where leaders motivate, they guide, they support, and they provide resources. Leaders recognize effective professional learning as a key strategy for supporting school and system improvements to increase student results. They cultivate a culture based on the norms of high expectations, shared responsibility, mutual respect, and relational trust, and establish organizational systems and structures that support effective professional learning and ongoing continuous improvement. Leaders continuously evaluate successive program implementation and learning systems for students and adults, and collaboratively guide curriculum and program planning and participate in professional learning with teachers and staff. The quality professional learning standards identify characteristics of professional learning that are most likely to support educators in building individual and collective capacity to meet professional, school, and student performance expectations. 7 interdependent standards promote professional learning. That is, the standards are rooted in student and educator needs demonstrated through data. They're focused on content and pedagogy. They're designed to ensure equitable outcomes. It's designed and structured to be ongoing, intensive, and embedded in practice. It's collaborative with an emphasis on shared accountability. It's supported by adequate resources, and it's coherent and aligned with other standards, policies, and programs. In this next part, we will do a deep dive of the chapters 4, 5, and 6 in the California ELD Standards publication. Beginning on page 145, chapters 4, 5, and 6 can be used for professional learning to assist in learning about the ELD standards and how to use them effectively for ELD instruction. The chapters provide technical information about the development of the standards, and they are intended to be read by a community of learners to explore the rationale behind elements of the standards. The development of the California ELD standards was informed by multiple theories and a large body of research pertaining to the linguistic and academic education of EL students. Beginning on page 147, chapter 4, Theoretical Foundations and the Research Base of the California ELD Standards, contains a wide body of scholarship and guidance that inform the development of the California ELD Standards. The research base was relied upon to ensure that the California ELD Standards highlight and amplify the language demands in the English language arts standards that are necessary for the development of advanced English and academic success across disciplines. The development of the California ELD Standards was informed by multiple theories and a large body of research pertaining to the linguistic and academic education of EL students. Social linguistic, social cultural, and social cognitive theories emphasize how learning is a social activity and how language is both a form of social action and a resource for accomplishing things in the world. These theories highlight the importance of recognizing and leveraging students' prior knowledge in order to make connections to and to foster new learning, in order to help them build conceptual networks and to support them to think about their thinking and language use. Teachers using these theories and research studies can help students to consciously apply particular cognitive strategies like inferring what the text means by examining textual evidence and by applying linguistic practices like intentionally selecting specific words or phrases to persuade others. Language and interaction play a central role in mediating both linguistic and cognitive development, and learning occurs through social interaction that is carefully structured to intellectually and linguistically challenge learners while also providing appropriate levels of support. Key findings from the synthesis of research and studies for teaching EL students indicate that effective instructional experiences for EL students have the following features. They are interactive and engaging, meaningful and relevant, and intellectually rich and challenging. They are appropriately scaffolded in order to provide strategic support that moves learners towards independence. They value and build on home language and culture and other forms of prior knowledge. And they build both academic English and content knowledge. After analyzing the design of the ELD standards, you may begin to see how these research theories set the foundation for the development of the ELD standards. And as we continue to review this and the other chapters, I encourage you to think about the professional learning teachers would require to understand the ELD standards and to use them to provide integrated and designated ELD instruction. The section interacting in meaningful and intellectually challenging ways is on page 148. The importance of providing opportunities for EL students to interact in meaningful ways around intellectually challenging content has been demonstrated in multiple studies. Meaningful interaction in kindergarten through grade 12 settings include engaging in collaborative oral discussions with a peer or a small group of peers about texts and content topics. We cannot assume that students know how to engage in these interactive processes with other students, but teachers can successfully model and teach their students to engage in more academic ways of interacting with one another. Teachers can carefully structure collaborative learning practices that promote small group discussion among students about the science and history texts they read. Structured collaborative learning practices foster comprehension of the text, the acquisition of vocabulary and grammatical structures associated with the text, and more academic ways of engaging in conversations about the text. Teachers can provide structured and strategically supportive opportunities for students to develop more ways of intersecting meaningfully. The kinds of discourse skills expected in academic conversations can be fostered when teachers establish routines and expectations for equitable and accountable conversations. For example, having specific roles in conversations, where they carefully construct questions that promote extended discussion about academic content. For example, questions that require students to infer or explain something for which they have sufficient background knowledge, and provide appropriate linguistic support, for example, a sentence stem, graphic organizer, anchor charts, repetition, and more. Again, you may begin to see how these research theories set the foundation for the development of the ELD standards. And I encourage you to continue to think about the professional learning teachers would need to understand the ELD standards. The section scaffolding is on page 149. The term scaffolding refers to ways temporary supportive frameworks can be applied to provide temporary supports or adjustments to students' particular developmental needs to improve access to meaning and ongoing linguistic and cognitive development. The term draws from Vygotsky's notion of the zone of proximal development, or ZPD, which refers to the space that exists between what the learner can do independently and that which is too difficult for the learner to do without strategic support or scaffolding. The image on the slide shows a representation of the zone of proximal development with three ovals. The outer oval, beyond my reach, represents what the student has difficulty in doing without substantial support. The middle oval, what I can learn with help, represents what a student can learn when they have sufficient scaffolding with moderate support. And the middle blue circle represents what the student can do on their own with light support. Scaffolding is intentionally designed for a learner's particular needs and then systematically and strategically carried out. The level of scaffolding depends on many factors, including the nature of the task and the learner's background knowledge of relevant content, as well as the learner's proficiency with the language required to engage in and complete the task. Scaffolding does not change the intellectually challenge of the task, but merely allows learners to build the knowledge and skills for independent performance of the task at some future point. Scaffolding allows EL students to meaningfully engage with and gain access to the content standards at a grade level proficiency, regardless of the English language proficiency. Scaffolding practices are selected in accordance with the standards-based goals of the lesson, the identified needs of the learner, and the anticipated challenge of the task. The levels of scaffolding for EL students span the English language development proficiency level continuum, as demonstrated by the black arrow on the slide. For students at the emerging proficiency level, the kind of scaffolding or linguistic support is substantial. Students at the early stages of the emerging level can engage in complex, cognitive demanding social and academic activities requiring language when provided substantial linguistic support. For students at the expanding proficiency level, the level of scaffolding and linguistic support is moderate. And for students at the bridging proficiency level, the level of linguistic support is light. Students at the early stages of the bridging level can engage in complex, cognitive demanding social academic activities requiring language when provided light linguistic support. For a detailed description, review the proficiency level descriptors table on page 20 of the ELD standards publication. Planned scaffolding is that in which teachers prepare in advance during lesson and curriculum planning to support EL students' access to content and linguistic development. Some examples of planned scaffolding include, but they're not limited to, consider what students already know, including their primary language and culture, and relating it to what they are to learn. Select and sequence tasks such as modeling and explaining, and provide guided practice in logical order. Frequently check for understanding during instruction, as well as gauging progress at appropriate intervals throughout the year. Choose texts carefully for specific purposes, for example, motivational purposes, linguistic, or content purposes, and provide a variety of collaborative groups and provide students with language models. This planned scaffolding allows teachers to provide just-in-time scaffolding during instruction to flexibly attend to the needs of EL students as they interact with content and language. Some examples of just-in-time scaffolding may include prompting a student to elaborate on a response to extend their language use and training, paraphrasing a student's response and including target academic language as a model, and at the same time, accepting the student's response using everyday or flawed language. Also, adjusting instruction on the spot based on frequent checking for understanding, and linking what a student is saying to prior knowledge or to learning that is coming up, like previewing. And for EL students, instruction and strategic support in the student's primary language can serve as a powerful scaffold to English literacy. The section Developing Academic English is on page 151. Academic English broadly refers to the language used in school to help students develop content knowledge and the language students are expected to convey their understanding of this knowledge. Interpreting, discussing, analyzing, evaluating, writing academic texts are complex literacy processes that involve the integration of multiple linguistic and cognitive skills, including word level processing, such as decoding and spelling. The ELD standards position English as a meaning-making resource with different language choices available based on discipline, topic, audience, task, and purpose. Research suggests that teachers can foster and even accelerate the development of academic English for EL students through multi-layered, multi-component approaches that focus on the way English works in different contexts. The section, The Importance of Vocabulary, is on page 151. The California State Standards for English Language Arts and Literacy, referred to as the ELA standards, draw attention to domain-specific and general academic vocabulary knowledge and usage due to the prevalence of these types of vocabulary in academic contexts. Research has concluded that focusing on domain-specific and general academic vocabulary with kindergarten through grade 12 or K through 12 EL students has demonstrated positive effects. The section Importance of Grammatical and Discourse Level Understanding is on page 151. The ELD standards were further informed by genre and meaning-based theories of language, which view language as a social process and a meaning-making system, and seek to understand how language choices construe meaning in oral and written texts. Advanced English proficiencies depend on the mastery of a set of academic registers used in academic settings and texts that may have multiple and complex meanings, all levels and subjects. Register refers to ways in which grammatical and lexical resources are combined to meet the expectations of the context, like the content area, topic, audience, and mode in which the message is conveyed. Register variations depend on what is happening or the content. It also depends on who the communicators are and the relationship to one another. For example, if it's written, spoken, or through multimedia text. EL students find it challenging to move from informal register or informal English to formal academic registers. The characteristics of these academic registers, which are critical for school success, include specialized and technical vocabulary, sentences and clauses that are densely packed with meaning and combined in purposeful ways, and whole texts that are highly structured and cohesive in ways that depend upon the disciplinary area and social purpose. That concludes a deep dive into Chapter 4 of the ELD standards, and we covered a wide body of scholarship and guidance that inform the development of the California ELD standards and help inform the instructional practices that are effective for EL students. Please take a moment to review some of the many topics we just highlighted from Chapter 4. Think about the ones that feel the most useful, significant, or relevant to you right now that could be addressed in professional learning. These considerations could consist of building students' prior knowledge, or helping students to think about their learning, or how to provide interactive and engaging learning experiences, using appropriate linguistic supports, implementing collaborative learning practices, scaffolding and levels of support, the zone of proximal development, proficiency level continuum, the development of academic English, the teaching domain specific and general vocabulary, understanding the academic register, and others. We will now take some time to pause and reflect regarding Chapter 4. In giving your role, either as a teacher or site administrator, coach, or district staff, how might you engage your colleagues in professional learning around the topic or the need you selected? And why would you need to provide this professional learning? Think about it, then post your ideas on our discussion Padlet. The link to the Padlet is in the chat. You will have 2 minutes to reflect and 1 minute to write your response in the Padlet. We will pause the recording during this reflection time, but we will resume the recording after everyone has had a chance to post the responses in the Padlet.
Okay, and I just want to highlight a few of the things. This is really fantastic. A couple. I value the knowledge of the best practices for ELD instruction. I would first start off by front loading these topics. We have a lot of new teachers. This might be a lot of information. However, a great start would be to introduce and highlight the points. And during weekly professional learning. And on a note on that, I cannot wait for you to hear toward the end of the presentation, just about 20 minutes, some leaders at a district who are doing precisely that. So thank you so much. And with that, we'll move on to Chapter 5, Learning About How English Works, beginning on page 159. And it provides an explanation of Part 2 of the California ELD standards. So the goal of Part 2 is to guide teachers to support EL students in ways that are appropriate to grade level and English language proficiency level so that EL students can A, unpack meaning in texts that they encounter across the disciplines to better comprehend them, and B, make informed choices about how to use language appropriately based on discipline, topic, purpose, audience, and task when producing written texts and oral presentations. And this slide discusses organization of Part 2. You can find this on page 172. So Part 2 identifies key language demands that may present particular challenges to EL students as they develop academic English across the disciplines. Part 2 is organized by language processes, 3 language processes, and 7 numbered strands, as listed here. So A is structuring cohesive texts, 1, understanding text structure, and 2, understanding cohesion. B, expanding and enriching ideas. That's 1, using verbs and verb phrases, 2, using nouns and noun phrases, and 3, modifying to add details. And C, connecting and condensing ideas. 1 is connecting ideas, and 2 is condensing ideas. So in Chapter 5, page 161 notes that although Part 2 is presented separately in order to draw educators' attention to it, the focus in Part 2 on understanding how English works is integral to and inseparable from EL students' development of meaning-making and purposeful interaction in Part 1. So this point is critical. It can be tempting to think of Part 2 as focusing on grammar, but this misunderstands the foundations on which the standards rest, which is that language and meaning are always interrelated. What we say has everything to do with how we say it. So we have to help students focus not only on the what of their reading, but the how. Now, the section titled Correspondence of Language Demands in ELA Literacy Standards to ELD Standards on page 161 indicates that the ELA literacy standards set high expectations for all students to participate in academic discourse across the disciplines. So in the ELA literacy standards, students are called on to sustain dialogue on a range of topics and in a variety of content areas, interpret the meaning of informational and literary texts, explain their thinking, construct arguments, produce written and oral texts, and develop an understanding of how English works. The California ELD standards respond to these demands by conceptualizing language as a complex, dynamic, and social meaning-making resource. Part 1 of the ELD standards focuses on interacting in meaningful ways to develop academic registers in English, and Part 2 emphasizes teaching about the grammatical patterns of academic English. It promotes EL students' reading comprehension and writing development. So we'll go to the next slide. And the section supporting EL students to develop academic English, starting on page 164, helps teachers know how to analyze the structures of text on many levels. Okay, understanding how English works on a variety of levels. The whole text, paragraph, sentence, phrase, and word levels. And part 2A, structuring cohesive texts, right? So that's showing us how we can think about levels or the text structure. And on, for example, in this chapter, there is an example of how to help students analyze language on these levels. And it's represented visually on this slide by whole text, paragraph, sentence, phrase, and word. So for example, the sentence unpacking activities gives concrete examples of activities that help students break complex sentences into parts so they can better comprehend them. Now, the section use of the California ELD standards, beginning on page 175, I think that of all the sections in this chapter, this may be the most important one. The California ELD standards are not intended to be used as a standalone document. Rather, they are designed to be used with the ELA standards as well as the California content standards. That is, ELD instruction should not be provided in a manner that is disconnected or isolated from core content instruction. In short, we really can't ever think of ELD as being separate from content. So please take a moment and review some of the topics that we just highlighted from Chapter 5 as considerations for professional learning. Think about the ones that feel most useful, significant, or relevant to you right now that could be addressed in professional learning. This can include organization of Part 2 of the standards, analyzing text structure at the whole text, paragraph, sentence, phrase, and word levels, or the relationship between the California ELD standards and ELA standards and other content areas. And we'll take another Padlet pause. Chapter 5 includes the following passage. Fostering the academic and linguistic development of ELs is best done in professional learnings of communities of practice, in which teams of teachers work together to recognize and identify language challenges in core content, develop strategies to address these challenges, regularly discuss student work, and reflect on the effectiveness of their instruction for student learning. That's Chapter 5, page 175. So with that in mind, please respond to the Padlet again. Given your current role, teacher, site administrator, coach, district staff, how might you engage your colleagues in professional learning around the topic that you selected, and why? You'll have a moment to reflect and to post your response on the Padlet, and we'll pause the recording during this reflection time, but we'll resume the recording after everyone has a chance to post their responses in the Padlet. So go ahead. There is so much great content in this Padlet. I only want to highlight a few for time's sake, but oh my goodness. I see a lot of connecting of the ELD standards to other content areas. I love this. My math teacher colleagues asked for EL support in the math curriculum, so I'd start there. That is fantastic. Where you work, I would love to come. We need to work to integrate content into our language and literacy instruction. Great point. And then someone else mentioned really looking at that word integrated and what that means, connecting ELD standards to other content areas. Thank you so much for your engagement in that. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it along to Gustavo.
The research summary and implications for EL students on page 178. So the following information is referenced in the publication beginning on page 178. The foundational literacy skills address print concepts, phonological awareness, phonic and word recognition, and fluency, and they are critical for EL students at all ages who need to learn basic literacy. Research so far shows that EL students can transfer native language literacy skills to English literacy learning. Literacy instruction for EL students will need to be adapted based on each student's previous literacy experiences in their native language, as well as on their age and level of schooling. Adapted instruction for EL students needs to consider the student's level of oral proficiency in the native language and in English. Needs to consider how closely the student's native language is related to English. And for students with native language literacy, the type of writing system used. The slide displays a summary of findings from the research cited on page 178 with implications for foundational literacy skills instruction for EL students. A finding, or one finding, is that instruction in the components of reading foundational skills benefit EL students. The implication for EL students is that instruction in foundational skills is essential for EL students, but it should be adjusted based on their spoken English proficiency and native language or English literacy proficiency. A finding is that oral proficiency in English is critical for EL students to develop proficiency in text level English reading and comprehension. The implication is that instruction in oral language knowledge, skills, and abilities must be explicit, intensive, and extensive. To be successful in reading, EL students must develop proficiency in listening and speaking skills in English at the same time that they're developing foundational skills in reading and writing English. Another finding is that native language literacy skills can help them learn English foundational literacy skills. The implication is that instruction for EL students will need to vary based on variations among their native language writing systems, as well as their experiences with literacy in their native language. Alignment charts for foundational literacy skills in ELD and ELA standards, page 179. The charts presented in Chapter 6 outline general guidance for providing instruction to EL students on foundational literacy skills that are aligned with the reading standards for foundational skills. The guidance provided in Chapter 6, beginning on page 179, is intended to provide a general overview. It does not address the full set of potential individual characteristics of EL students that need to be taken into consideration in foundational literacy skills instruction. For example, students who have changed schools or programs frequently, or students who have interrupted schooling in either their native language or English. This webinar will address the content from Chapter 6. While the focus of this chapter is on foundational skills, instruction in these skills should be integrated with instruction in reading comprehension and in content across all disciplines, as emphasized in the California ELD standards. The first column, student language and literacy characteristics, outlines some general characteristics of EL students' previous experience with language and literacy in both their native language and in English that need to be considered when teachers determine which foundational literacy skills a student may need to develop. These characteristics are oral skills and print skills. The second column, considerations for foundational literacy skills instruction, describes considerations for foundational literacy skills instruction when the characteristics in the first column are known. Considerations include the foundational literacy skills that a student with particular language or literacy characteristics may need to learn, and the native language literacy skills a student may be able to transfer to facilitate developing English literacy. The third column, ELA standards, the reading standards for foundational skills, shows the set of reading standards for foundational skills for elementary grade level and secondary grade levels that a student requiring instruction in English foundational literacy skills will need to achieve in order to reach proficiency in English literacy. EL students who enter school after kindergarten and need specific instruction in foundational English literacy skills based on the reading standards will require accelerated learning of those skills. It will be necessary to adapt the reading standards for EL students who need foundational English literacy skills after kindergarten based on the student's age, cognitive ability, and life and school experiences, including their level of oral language and literacy proficiency in their native language. The alignment chart for kindergarten is located on page 180. For the elementary level grades 1 through 5 on page 181, we know that foundational literacy skills are the same for all students who need to learn basic literacy skills, including students who begin learning literacy skills after kindergarten. However, the way skills are taught and how quickly the students can be expected to acquire the basic skills and move on to higher level reading and writing depend on their age, cognitive level, and previous oral and written literacy experiences in their native language and in English. The reading standards need to be adapted using appropriate strategies and materials to meet the literacy needs of EL students who begin learning literacy skills after kindergarten, addressing the needs to teach foundational literacy skills in an accelerated time frame. Secondary level, grades 6 through 12, on page 187. Foundational literacy skills are the same for all students who need to learn the basic literacy skills, including secondary students. However, the way skills are taught and how quickly the students can be expected to acquire the basic skills and move on to higher level reading and writing, again, depends on their age, cognitive level, and previous oral and written literacy experiences in their native languages and in English. So I encourage you to review the alignment chart for grades 6 through 12 displayed in chapter 6. That concludes a deep dive into chapter 6 of the ELD standards. We covered the foundational literacy skills and instructional considerations for EL students in grades kindergarten through 12. Take a moment to review some of the topics we just highlighted from chapter 6 and think about the ones that feel the most useful, significant, or relevant to you right now that could be addressed in professional learning. Considerations for professional learning could consist of the reading standards, foundational literacy skills, adapting the reading standards, foundational literacy skills, explicit, intensive, extensive oral language instruction, listening comprehension, scaffolding and strategies, text level reading comprehension, foundational literacy skills instruction for newcomer EL students in grades K through 6 and in grades 7 through 12, reading and writing instruction for newcomer EL students in grades kinder through 6 and grades 7 through 12, language transfer from primary language to English, and maybe others. So we will take some time to pause and reflect on topics we covered in chapter 6. And again, please respond in the discussion tablet. And how may you engage your colleagues in professional learning around the topics we covered and you selected from chapter 6. So take a little bit of time to respond in the Padlet. We will pause the recording and we will come back after you finish and you've had a chance to post your responses in the Padlet. It can be a daunting task, so this helps a lot. Excellent. Someone else shared, I'll read that one again. The alignment charts have been very helpful to use when I coach administrators and teachers in better understanding where to start. It can be a daunting task, so this helps a lot. Well, that's an excellent response there. Thank you. Share the critical messaging that if missing, foundational skills must be taught in middle and high school with age-appropriate methodology. Excellent, right? And I think chapter 6 provides some really good guidance as to what to consider when doing that. just a couple more. Use alignment charts and include foundational literacy skills instruction for newcomers during designated ELD and working with teachers which skills are to be taught at each grade level. Wonderful. And thank you all, everyone, for all your other responses. And we will go ahead and continue with our webinar. And now I'll pass it over to Christine.
Thank you, Gustavo. All right, we are so lucky to have voices from the field to now provide a real-world perspective on designing professional learning grounded in the ELD standard. And I have had the pleasure of working closely across the 2023-2024 school year with leaders from Grossmont Union High School District, Michelle Estill and Joanne Phillips. I truly cannot wait for you to hear about how they have been engaging in this work. And in case you'd like to reach out to them after the webinar to learn more about what they're going to share, we'll drop their contact information in the chat, as well as the link to the Grossmont English Learner Program's webpage. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Michelle.
Thank you, Christine. Good afternoon. My name is Michelle Estill, and I'm the Director of English Learner Programs for Grossmont Union High School District. I've been an educator for 23 years, teaching English, both ELA and language acquisition at the high school level. I'm actually a US-born English learner myself, with an American mom and a Southern Mexican dad. I was born in Los Angeles and then moved to Merida when I was 2. We moved back to the States when I was in 5th grade, and although I spoke English just like this, I did not know how to read or write in English. It took my teacher until almost winter break to realize that I was an English learner. I used all my reading and writing skills in Spanish to try to read and write in English, but as we know, that could only take me so far. With me today is our curriculum specialist, Joanne Phillips, who will be joining me in sharing our journey.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Michelle has said, my name is Joanne Phillips, and I am the English Learner Curriculum Specialist for our district, which means I have the great opportunity to work alongside Michelle. It is so exciting to be able to coach colleagues from their prior knowledge to new learning, and this role has grown me in so many amazing ways. I began as a teacher of emerging English learners, excited to travel around the world in the comfort of my own classroom. How little I knew then. I have also taught all levels of high school English, from college prep to AP Lit, realizing that what I was teaching in my emerging classroom fit equally in my AP class. And now, 21 years later, I am still discovering the nuances of language. And now I'll hand it over to you, Michelle.
Thanks, Joanne. Now that you've met us, I'd like to introduce you to our district and the students that we serve. Grossmont Union High School District is located in East County, San Diego, and as of February 1st, 2024, we have a total enrollment of about 15,523 students, of which 2,403 are English learners, representing about 15.5% of the total student population. The map on the right side is a heat map indicating the countries where GUHSD English learner students were born. The map shows that our families come to us from over 60 countries and speak more than 32 languages. At this point in the school year, we've received over 310 newcomers to our district, with about 9% of them scoring initially fluent proficient or IFEP on the initial LPAC. In our district, we provide designated ELD as a standalone course that every English learner is enrolled in, no matter their proficiency, no matter their grade level, and no matter the number of years they've been enrolled in U.S. schools. In our district, we don't visualize a student's English proficiency one-dimensionally or think about the 4 domains of reading, writing, listening, and speaking as separate or distinct. Instead, we think about language proficiency in a holistic way. As we know from Chapter 2 of the standards, proficiency levels can shift in each domain, moving from emerging to expanding to bridging. On the left side of the slide is a proficiency level radar chart. When we plot a student's level in each domain and connect the dots, it shows a student's proficiency picture. In this example, using the 3-point LPAC domain score, a student's proficiency picture shows a score of level 3 in speaking and a level 2 in reading, writing, and listening. Changing 1 point on the chart changes the overall student's proficiency picture. Additionally, when rostering students, we also try to keep in mind the impact that the number of years in U.S. schools has. This additional facet helps us attend to the students' language learning needs in a more targeted way. This is why, whenever possible, and master schedules lend themselves to it, we try to program students into courses by LPAC proficiency as well as years in U.S. schools. We know that our long-term English learners, those who have been in U.S. schools for 5 years or more, need a different focus for their English acquisition versus our newcomers, those who have been in U.S. schools for 18 months or less. We even know that students we call developing, those in U.S. schools between 18 months and 5 years, need yet a different focus for their language acquisition. Although our newcomers and developing students may benefit from the language instruction long-term English learners are receiving, they have yet other facets we need to keep in mind, which are acquisition of new school culture, how learning happens in this culture as compared to what they're used to, and simply navigating what it's like to be a teen in California. We really try to look at the whole student, not just part. Before we move into what this year's professional learning looked like, I wanted to share with you how we even got to a mandatory professional learning opportunity. We take seriously the requirements the federal government sets for us, and we use the CDE EL program instrument as our guide. We'll drop a link to that guide in the chat now. One of the requirements is having ongoing, sustained professional learning specifically for improving teacher instruction and helping English learners accelerate their English acquisition. Basically, you need to come to professional learning. Any teacher in our district that teaches designated ELD is required to come to the outline professional learning for the year. Keeping this in mind, we'd like to share our structure for designated ELD professional learning. Each day, we structure the learning by explore, then expand, then apply. Joanne will now explain more.
Thank you, Michelle, for outlining our daily structure. Now, I'd like to walk everyone through our 3-year plan for building capacity around the ELD standards. Before we began year 1, we realized that if teachers knew the standards, many were looking at the standards more as a checklist instead of viewing them as interrelated. They work together, similar to our proficiency picture. Therefore, we started year 1 with an overview of standards and grounding for our work in the framework. We needed everyone to be on the same page, so we read the standards. Individually, as small groups, we decoded. To give you a picture, I'll share my favorite activity, ELD standards speed dating. Speed was key. First, everyone, including Michelle and I, read the standards with a note taker, translating each standard into our own words. There are 19 standards, and we had 20 minutes. Then we partnered and just shared our observations about a standard for 2 minutes. Time up, next partner, new standard, new 2 minutes. Rinse and repeat for all 19. This is just one example of how we set the foundations. In structuring year 2, we wanted to build on the foundation of year 1. We know the standards are intentionally designed to be used in tandem, as Chapter 5 of the standards calls out. We wanted this understanding reflected in this year's essential question. How do we guide students to interact in meaningful ways? Part 1 of the standards, by learning how English works, Part 2. Neither Part 1 nor Part 2 can be developed in isolation. And now I'll hand it back to Michelle.
Thanks, Joanne. Now, we haven't yet finished this year's journey, but for year 3, we're looking at having a few different pathways of learning for teachers to choose from. Some teachers who are new to teaching designated ELD will be ushered to the introductory learning pathway, while other teachers who've taught designated ELD for more than 3 years can opt for the coaching pathway, which will use the cycle of inquiry method. In all of this professional learning, Joanne and I are active participants. Although we are facilitating, we are not the holders of all knowledge. As with climbing Machu Picchu, sometimes we're the Sherpas carrying the bags, and other times we're the guides pointing out which direction we're going to be heading in. Now that we have shared our learning design and plan, let's dive into what we're doing in our 23-24 designated ELD professional learning. This year, we're supporting 36 designated ELD teachers from 10 schools. Looking at the picture on the right, you can see that we have a total of 5 days of professional learning, with days 2, 3, and 4 broken out by proficiency level. To be able to foster learning, conversation, and improved instructional practices around the standards, we decided that we needed a combination of small group learning with large group reflection. Day 1 was the summer launch, where everyone was together, laying the foundation and purpose of our time together. Joanne, will you share?
Thanks, Michelle. Day 2, 3, and 4 had participants in small groups, differentiated by proficiency level, emerging, expanding, and bridging, depending on the language proficiency level of the majority of students they teach. This gave teachers the opportunity to really dig in with colleagues and have space to have laser focus on proficiency level specific standards. We had an outline of where we were going with similar content, but really each group was given enough freedom to make that content learning their own. Dividing up into proficiency levels allowed us to prioritize responding to each teacher's needs. At the end of each of these days, we asked teachers to capture their learning so that they can share out on day 5, which Michelle will explain.
Yes, and so on day 5, we're hoping that all participants will present their learning to the whole group at our learning showcase. If we haven't been able to articulate what it is that we've learned and how it's impacted our instruction, then I'm not sure we've met our goal. We're also expecting site and central office administration to be part of this day, to be able to hear what the teachers at their sites have learned. Having administrators that did not participate in the learning present on day 5 helps build programmatic cohesion. Now, Joanne will give us a brief snapshot of what one day looked like.
Thanks, Michelle, for providing the big picture for our professional learning plan this year. To give you an idea of the content we covered, here is a snapshot of day 2. Each group met on a different day. Bridging met September 7th, Expanding September 13th, and Emerging September 14th. We had a general agenda for all 3 days to explore, expand, and apply their learning. This is what that looked like, showing how tasks and activities varied by segment of the day. To start, in the explore part of the day, we read research on proficiency level relevant topics. For emerging, we explored an excerpt from the 2023 Newcomer Toolkit from the U.S. Department of Education. And for expanding and bridging, we explored an excerpt from the 2014 Meeting the Unique Needs of Long-Term English Learners by Lori Olson. Then we expanded our learning of part 2, learning how English works. On this day, we dove into Strand A, structuring cohesive texts, deconstructing standards 1, understanding text structure, and 2, understanding cohesion. We focused on the elements of growth essential for proficiency level in a hands-on way. This day, we deconstructed 3 LPAT questions assessing these standards. In the afternoon, we applied learning by opening up the time for site-based collaboration and planning time grounded in the day's focal standards strand. And GUHSD teacher-created ELD standards grounded instructional materials. This time was closed by teams sharing and individual reflection and learning capture. We had each person catalog their learning on a slide that would follow to the next PD day to capture their individual learning journey.
Thanks, Joanne. There's so much we can do with standards. We chose to be as laser focused as possible. That meant that we were willing to prune activities and learning that were not in service of the final learning goal. Much like when we prune fruit trees, we have to be willing to cut off branches, even already budding branches, so that we may have a larger harvest of learning, which will ultimately impact our students. I'll hand it back to Joanne.
Thanks for that, Michelle. In addition to our professional learning, we have gathered DELD teacher-created ELD standards grounded lessons to share as resources on our website. Here you can see a snapshot of that lesson resource. Viewers can filter by category, scaffold and support, length, or engagement expectation. And first and foremost, by ELD standard of focus for the lesson. Some examples of these lessons include a 10 to 15-minute language analysis activity, connotation practice. Step 1, what is connotation? That is guided by standard 1.8 analyzing language. A 10 to 15-minute complexity activity, double check presentation for cohesion that develops standard 2.2 understanding cohesion. A 10 to 15-minute complexity activity about feedback that explores standard 1.7 evaluating language. We'll post that link in the chat now and let Michelle have the last word.
Thanks, Joanne. So there are a lot of lessons that we have learned. The first lesson we've learned is related to bandwidth and personnel. In order for our program to be successful, I have to release leadership in others to expand the work. Joanne and I are fantastic, but we can't do it alone. We have to somehow create a system that builds capacity in others so that work is sustainable and long-lasting. The second lesson relates to funding. EL Roadmap Principle 4 calls for alignment and articulation within and across systems. In order for me to have a system in place, I really need to be part of the local control and accountability plan. We're entering into this next 3-year cycle of creating LCAP goals. We cannot let English learner students be an afterthought. A third lesson relates to complexity. I want to normalize that this work is complex. It's not easy, and it's also very deeply meaningful. Don't just look at our product or our activities and copy them. You must navigate your own journey with your own teachers to be able to be responsive to their needs. You have to be open to putting together a roadmap and willing to take the detours needed, even if that means it adds more time to your journey. Always keep focus on the purpose of what you're doing. Let's not forget how important this work is. As our state superintendent, Mr. Tony Thurman says, English learners face the unique challenge of learning English as they are also learning grade level content through English. That's a complex job we're tasked with, and certainly a very fulfilling one. And with that, we'll close. Thank you so much for your time. We very much appreciate it.
This is Gustavo. I want to give a big thanks to Michelle and Joanne for sharing with us the real life effort to provide ELD standards and instruction professional learning to teachers in your district and to support the learning of your English learner students. Thank you so much for being with us and sharing all your knowledge. We will now take the rest of our time to answer questions that you posted in the Q&A. So we will do that. Let's see. Christine, if you can join me. Let me see. I don't see any questions. Okay, we have some questions already answered. Wonderful. Are there any other questions that anyone would like to submit? Will the slides be available? These slides, actually, the recording of this webinar will be posted on the California Department of Education ELD Standards webpage. So look for that. If we can post the slides with that, we will.
I see a comment. Thank you to Grossmont for sharing your professional learning process. Thank you. I want to thank you as well. If anyone has any questions for Michelle or Joanne, please go ahead and post them in the Q&A if you want.
And Veronica asked the links shared. Can you add them to the invite? What I will do personally is I'll collect all the links and I'm going to send it out to everyone who attended today's webinar. So look for that in the next upcoming days. And how soon will the recording be available? It's a slow process. So when the recordings do become available, we will definitely notify everyone who attended these webinars, and we will make a public notification. Wonderful. Excellent. We thank you all for those questions. We have a little bit more to share with you. Okay, so this concludes the presentation portion of today's webinar session. And now Christine will share with you an opportunity to evaluate this webinar. Christine?
Thank you so much. Yeah, before we close, we'd love to share a link to the feedback survey for this webinar. Your feedback on today's webinar is very important. It will really help us continuously improve our practice and ensure future webinars meet your needs. So a link to the survey will be provided in the chat. There it is. And also you can access it using the QR code. Please go ahead and share your feedback. It's very important. And now I'll turn it over to Gustavo for the final closing.
Thank you for that, Christine. So we have upcoming ELD standards webinars. So please join us for these future webinars. The next webinar, titled California ELD Standards Proficiency Level Descriptors, which will cover Chapter 2 of the ELD Standards publication, will take place on Wednesday, March 20th, 2024. The fourth webinar is California ELD Standards Part 1, Interacting in Meaningful Ways, which will cover Part 1 of the ELD Standards in Chapter 3, and that will take place on Wednesday, April 24th. And the fifth webinar and the last of this series, the California ELD Standards Part 2, learning about English, how English works. And that will take place on Wednesday, May 22nd. If you go to the California ELD Standards website and click on the ELD Standards tab, there you will also find the webinar information and registration links. But we also put those into the chat. Or if we haven't, we will. Excellent. Thank you. So at this point, we want to thank you. We want to thank Michelle, Estelle, and Joanne Phillips for sharing the important work that they are doing with their colleagues. We would like to also I would also like to thank my colleagues in the Language Policy and Leadership Office, Lori Kelling and Emily Ingram, for their help in putting on today's webinar. And on behalf of my co-presenter, Christine, and the administrators and staff from the Multilingual Support Division and the Region 15 Comprehensive Center at WestEd, we thank you all for joining us today. See you next time.